Remember, Machiavelli was saying it's better to be feared than loved. If you have to choose, you'd like to be both feared and loved. But if you can't be both feared and loved, it's safer, he says, to be feared. Now, what happens if you're feared too much? You become hated. And and it's one of the things that drives me crazy when I watch movies or TV shows and they've got these bad guys that are just like so extreme. And I just sit there and go, oh, come on, man. By now, somebody would have killed them. Because it isn't just that they're bad, that people are afraid of them. Like, I don't know if any of you guys you guys watched The Walking Dead? Any chance? If you have, there's a bad guy in there, Negan. And when I'm watching Negan, like the first time he shows up, he does some things that you look at and go, okay, he's feared. But then he does some things in the show where you sit there and go, oh, come on, that guy would have to be so hated by everybody around him that he wouldn't be safe. Because the only reason that he would be safe is if other people were protecting him. The only reason they'd be protecting him is if they feared him or loved him, or both, but didn't hate him. Because if you hate somebody and you see somebody walking up to them with a gun, you can realize, I guess this solves some problems, doesn't it? And you can put some distance between you and the person you're supposed to be trying to protect. But if you love that person, or if you fear that person, then there's something there that may cause you to defend them. So in other words, if you conform out of fear, like I said, someone puts a gun to your head and says, sweep this floor or else I'm going to kill you. Well, something happens in you where if you get to a point of hating that person, now you're just waiting for an opportunity to rebel, to revolt. If you don't have that sense inside of you, well, then you're always going to be conforming. So if you're apathetic, in other words, if you just kind of shrug your shoulders and go, all right, whatever, and you just get used to going along with everything, you don't have any strong emotions one way or the other, which means you don't have any strong reason not to do that thing that you're being asked to conform into. I hope that makes sense. This is one of the reasons that we discovered that in psychology that making people afraid or making people hate or any of these things, these aren't the most useful mechanisms for controlling people. There's your transition, I guess, into our next article, which will be on the rape of the mind, on brainwashing. But what we find is that the best way to make people conform, first off, is apathy. We just don't care. You make it so that people just don't care one way or the other. And you'll hear this kind of talk from people. They'll ask you like, hey, good example. I don't know if you've ever heard this from people before. Like, if a police officer stops you and talks to you, and you'll be like, dude, why are they bothering me? And then somebody will ask you, well, what do you care? I mean, do you have something to hide? Well, no. Well, if you don't have something to hide, what do you care? That kind of conversation is designed to create an apathy in you. To say, well, yeah, I guess so. What do I care? And then what happens is eventually you get used to that kind of thing happening. A police officer can just stop you and talk to you whenever they want. You're walking through the mall. A security guard can just stop you and ask you what you're doing. You're walking through the hallway and a teacher can just stop you and search your bag. Why? Well, what do you have to hide? Now, I understand. Some of you have an answer to that question. What do you have to hide? But then what happens is you stop doing those things that you have to hide. And then, of course, at that point you have nothing to hide. And that just becomes kind of like this norm of society that you just get used to. My role in society is to always be checked up on. My role in society is to always have my stuff searched, to be stopped, to be questioned, and all that. And you just get used to that being the normal state of things. So once you can create that in people, an apathy, now conformity is really, really easy. And I remember that this was kind of the scourge of my generation, apathy. I was describing it a few days ago that with my generation, well, God, I guess we're paying for it right now, aren't we, with Russia and Ukraine. The Soviet Union had collapsed. There was no other superpower in the world. It was just the United States. We were cultural zenith, military zenith. We were economic zenith of the world. No one could touch us. I mean, it was like the U.S. and like second place was like way down here somewhere. There was nobody even close to us. So what that meant was that my generation didn't have an enemy. We had no one to fight against. We had nothing to rage against. So what did we do? Well, we threw on flannel, got some Doc Martens, and started listening to grunge and buying $5 cups of coffee. And then we're sitting there looking at the $5 cup of coffee. we sat there looking at our $5 cup of coffee, which, by the way, this video is brought to you by Starbucks. We're looking at our $5 cup of coffee, and we're like, man, haven't you ever noticed how everything is about consumerism? It's about, people just don't do stuff unless you do it for money. And then we're like, yeah, man, it's all about money. And then we start to reject that. We're like, man, there's so much more to life than money. We're like, yeah. But at the same time, you start seeing an explosion in advertisements everywhere. So the more that we tried to kind of rage against the consumerism, it even became a joke. There's a movie called Wayne's World. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a movie from the 90s. And it's about these two guys who have like a little, public access TV show that gets picked up by a major network. And when it was their own show on public access, they could do whatever they wanted to do. And then once they were on the network, all of a sudden they had to start placating advertisers and doing all this stuff. So there's a scene where the TV executive goes to them and says, hey, I'm going to need you guys to do a commercial spot for this video game, this arcade company. That's how old the movie was. It was an arcade. And the two guys at the show were like, no, that's not us, though. We don't do things just for consumer. And then it cuts to them, one guy's wearing a suit that's all Reebok. Reebok headband, Reebok t-shirt, Reebok shoes. He's got his feet up. He's like, yeah, it's like people only do things for money. And they cut to the other guy, and he's complaining also, and he's got a Pizza Hut box open, he's facing the camera, and he's eating a Pizza Hut pizza. And the whole scene is designed to make fun of the idea of doing exactly what, in truth, they actually are doing. They really are selling out in the movie, but they're making a joke out of it, so we all sit there and go, ah, ha, 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 ha. Well, whatever, it's everywhere, so that's just the way things are. It's in movies, it's in TV, so you just get used to it. One of the things is you see stadiums. You ever go what's the stadium that we have here in San Diego? Qualcomm? Who's Qualcomm?
Well,
No, Qualcomm still exists.
they tore it down and they're building something new.
Right, but I mean the company still exists.
Oh, they're building a new stadium.
Yeah. So what's the other one that we have here?
Oh,
Petco. It used to be Jack Murphy Stadium, and then it became Qualcomm because the corporation Qualcomm started to sponsor it. So now all these stadiums all over the country are now renamed after major corporations. Candlestick Park in San Francisco used to be Jack Murphy Stadium. So corporations buy the naming rights. So now the thing is that sort of thing is just everywhere now. You can't walk down the street without getting hit by a billboard or an advertisement or something like that. And I'm not saying that started in the 90s. I'm saying that you really see it kind of start to explode, but all these things get renamed. Why? Because that's just the way it is. Oh well. I'm not saying that you should rebel against renaming a stadium Qualcomm instead of calling it Jack Murphy Stadium, but it is worth kind of considering, why was it named Jack Murphy in the first place? Because Jack Murphy was an important dude in San Diego. How would you feel if you were Jack Murphy and you're like, we're going to name a stadium after you? Oh my God, thank you so much. After decades of service to our community, and we love what you did for San Diego, band of sacrifice. And then you're like, oh, I really appreciate that. It's so wonderful. And a few years later, sorry dude, someone wrote us a check. Think about what message we have now sent. Now, we aren't telling the world this necessarily, but this is the message that we're sending. Well, you can buy us. It isn't so much, no matter how great you are, no matter how good you are, no matter how much you do for your community, no matter how much self-sacrifice, anything like that, if someone writes us a check, you're gone. Well, gosh, what does that make you feel like if you realize that as a person? In other words, if you're dropped into that world, then that's the world that you're walking in. Just like the fish who swims in the water has no idea, doesn't even recognize that the water's there until someone points it out. Once you recognize that that's the case, it can start to grate on you. Now, if you were dropped in the middle of that, and then you just see the advertisement everywhere, as you guys probably do, it doesn't even occur to you that that's the case. But that's not a good thing. That doesn't mean that you're not therefore affected by it. That means that your character is affected by that in unconscious ways. Remember, until we make the unconscious conscious, we'll do what we've always done, and we're going to call it fate. So if you don't recognize that that's what's going on, that that's what's happening to you, that doesn't mean you're not impacted by it. In fact, it means that you're impacted by it at a very difficult level to overcome. In fact, that's when we'll hear things like that and say, oh my God, why does it even bother you so much? Because you're replacing something important there. It isn't anymore about honor. It isn't so much anymore about sacrifice. It isn't so much about commitment. We put something else above that. So now what the message that sends to us as a society is, Who cares how good you are? The question is, how much money did you make doing it? And we see that kind of thing all the time on social media. I mean, how often do we see an influencer? Oh my God, we even call them influencers, and that's scary as hell, because that means that their whole job is to influence you to do something, to buy something, to behave in a certain way. We don't really think of it this way, but that's exactly why they're called influencers. It's right in front of our faces, and yet we miss it. And we're like, oh. We think like, oh, because they do influence people. Yeah, but they're also paid to influence. We put that above anything else. Do you think that, I mean, I wonder if your average, I don't know, by the way, I really don't know the answer to this. This is just a thing I'm pondering at the moment. I wonder if your average TikToker or YouTube personality even considers these things. Or if this is the thing they look to solely. And then we excuse it, and we say, whatever, they're making money. And we're like, yeah, that's true, they're making money. And so now that has replaced, that has now replaced this, because we've been kind of, not coerced, but led into this thing, not caring. Of course, it becomes difficult, because then you get people who do care, and sometimes we seem like maybe we care about the wrong things, or I'll leave it at that. But I would just say, kind of be aware of this apathy thing, because apathy can lead us into conformity. Oh, thank you. And so, the opposite of courage isn't cowardice, is to conform. And conformity itself, you can see it in there. What does this word mean? Go on.
With.
En español.
With.
With. So conform with. Conform with. So it's to form with something. So to do this. Conformity doesn't have to just be that you're forced, again, to do something, because my goodness, that doesn't necessarily work. As I was saying, we're going to read in Use from or Lose Race with the Mind. We find that conformity is not the thing, fear and is not the thing that gets people to conform best. We can get people to be apathetic. We can also get people to form with something. How do I even describe this? Unsteadiness. I promise you I'll have a better word for this next week when we start looking at the text. But unsteadiness. If we can make people apathetic so they don't care anymore, and then we can unsettle the ground around you. And we do that, we unsettle the ground around you linguistically. In other words, we redefine terms. We make it so that, how about this? Here's a good example. You get someone like Kevin Hart. Sorry, Kevin Hart. Okay. So you guys, probably some of you guys heard, he was supposed to host the Oscars, I think it was, last year. And then he made some tweets like 7 years ago, where, I guess 8 years ago now, where he made a comment about not wanting his son to be gay. His son was a little boy or something like that. So then you fast forward 7 years and people are clutching their pearls. Oh my goodness, this comedian who said something offensive. Isn't that what a comedian's job is, by the way? That would be like, oh my God, a philosopher said something offensive. It isn't to be offensive. It's just that sometimes the things that we say are offensive. I hope we see the distinction there. Our goal in life should not be to be offensive. Our goal should be to tell the truth. And if telling the truth is offensive, well, we have to recognize sometimes. History is politically incorrect. And so we fast forward that, and then many people jumped on that bandwagon and we're like, oh my God, we have to destroy this person because he told naughty jokes 7 years ago. And I was thinking this last week, I saw so many people on Facebook and on Instagram and so forth rallying behind Ukraine. And they're like, yeah, that's right, I stand with Ukraine. And so I saw that, so someone like me who knows a little something clutches my pearls. And I say, oh my goodness, you stand with Ukraine? Don't you realize that Ukraine, the country Ukraine, presently right now, has a battalion called the Azov Battalion. They're a battalion of neo-Nazis. Actual neo-Nazis. You can look this up. The symbol on their flag is essentially, you look at that and you go, that's a swastika. And they're like, no, 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 no. It's a lightning bolt. It's a lightning bolt. I'll show it to you guys in a minute. And you look at the background of their flag, it's a Nazi symbol. It's called the Black Sun. And they don't even hide this. If you ask them, so I understand that you guys have a neo-Nazi battalion in your National Defense Forces, and they go, oh yeah, we do. 12,000 strong. They're actually like a special forces team. They're not even just like going in like normal soldiers. They're special forces. So, if I understand you correctly, those of you out there who are posting support for Ukraine, I'm trying to clutch my pearls, you're supporting Nazism? Oh my God! You need to come off. You need to come off social media immediately. Yeah, you need to get out there and you need to apologize to the world because you're supporting people who are Nazis today. Not a joke that was made 7 years ago, but instead, Special Forces military organization right now, which by the way is 100% volunteer. These aren't people who were drafted into it and are like, well, I guess I'm a Nazi now. These are people who are from Ukraine specifically, who go into that regiment because it supports their political ideologies. And not just Ukrainians, people from all over the world go there and volunteer. They've got people from Sweden, they've got people from the US, they've got people from South Africa, they've got people from all over the Middle East, they've got people from Asia, who all go there and get along because they agree on this one ideology. And so, they're out there right now fighting against the Russians. So, I hope that all of us who stand there and say that we rally behind Ukraine will also post on our Facebook, say, I also support the brave men of the Azov Battalion. And make sure you post their flag with their symbols, okay? That way everyone knows where you stand. Is it true that if you think that Russia shouldn't invade Ukraine, that therefore means that you stand with Nazis? Because by the way, that's one of the things that Putin has said. He has said, we're going in there to defeat these Nazis because, Putin's Jewish. And so he's like, we have to stop this scourge of anti-Semitism and Nazism from taking over Europe again. Does anybody believe that Ukraine is going to take over Europe? But one thing I did say that should kind of concern some of us is that, like I said, there are volunteers from all over the world. What do you suppose happens when their training is complete? They go back to where they came from. And then those people are trained into that ideology. Those people are then, therefore, trained militarily, and they're skilled at recruiting other people. So now you have, essentially, you've trained people and then sent them back to go plant terrorist cells all around the world. That should sound familiar to us. That's exactly what happened in the 90s, coming out of Afghanistan. And now, what's the point of all that? Well, now I don't know what to do. Because, by the way, Russia, with Russia, we're facing a Sudetenland situation right now. Remember the days leading up to World War II, Hitler sent a bunch of soldiers. I just use the word soldiers loosely. They're actually a bunch of guys on horseback to go and occupy a region called the Sudetenland. And Hitler said, that belongs to Germany, when it was a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. He was not allowed to do that. And he sent in a bunch of soldiers that, like I said, guys on horseback. These were not his elite soldiers. This was not his elite equipment. Why did he do it? Because he wanted to see what would happen. And he looked at it and he's like, let's see what happens. Well, I'm sure he yelled it because he likes to yell. But when they went in, he had some peace meetings now with the people, with the nations of Europe, and they said, all right, tricky Hitler, but don't do anything else, okay? And he's like, hey, Romney's. He's got his fingers crossed, he has toes crossed, he's got ankles, and then immediately after that, he invades and a massive war breaks out. Hitler writes, we understand from his writings, from his letters, he understood that that was going to be the test. If Europe said, hell no, and they sent in soldiers, the group he sent in there had orders to retreat immediately. They weren't there to fight, they were there to test. And once Europe then said, no, we're not going to fight, okay, then Hitler said, see, they're still hungover from World War I. Here we go. Yeah, and he sent that message that now this is weakness. You guys ever hear the Black Hawk Down incident? Very long story short. The 90s also. 90s were challenging. This is why when people say, oh my God, things are so terrible now. I'm like, I remember the 90s. And riots and pandemics and all that stuff that was version 1.0. We trained for it. Very, very long story short, U.S. Special Forces went in to go capture a Somalian warlord who was allegedly was stealing supplies and food and all that stuff from UN drops that were there to feed the people of Somalia. There was a terrorist group that was over there that was being led by a guy. The group was a group called Al-Qaeda. Have you ever heard of him before? Big dude, Bin Laden? Yeah, that guy. He wasn't there, but they specifically set this thing up to see kind of what would happen. So U.S. soldiers went in, and we were ambushed. And long story short, 2 of our helicopters were shot down, 17 soldiers were killed. I can't remember how many more wounded, but there was a lot wounded. And they kind of set the whole thing up so that when the soldiers went in there, it was a trap. And afterwards, there were these videos that were sent all over the world of the Somalians dragging the bodies of the Americans through the town of Somalia, through the city of Mogadishu. And so Americans saw that, and what was the American response to that? Oh my goodness, why are we even there? Oh, get our soldiers out of there. So President Clinton withdrew the soldiers. Bin Laden has said that when we withdrew soldiers from Mogadishu, that's what convinced him in his mind, the Americans don't have the stomach for war. So then they start planning 9/11 and all that. All of these things, they don't just pop up out of nowhere. They pop up from this idea that if you allow people to get away with stuff, then they're just going to do more stuff. Apathy, shrugging our shoulders. Well, let's just leave. We shrug our shoulders. Well, it's just the Sudetenland, they're just some guys on horseback. Who cares? But now here's the problem. Who are you going to support now? Russians who are invading Ukraine, and if nothing happens, we know he's going to go further, because that's his whole plan. He's kind of outlined it pretty well for us. Or do you support the guys who have the neo-Nazi battalion? So who are you guys in favor of, the Nazis or the expansionist Russians who could launch World War III? Who do you want to support? Welcome to the real world. This is the problem of the real world, and this is why we should be charitable with people who make difficult decisions, because there is no easy choice here. We're sitting over here just, playing our Xboxes and trying to figure out which bathrooms to use, and then they're over there doing that, and we're like, oh, we got problems over here. What do you know? Who cares? It's their thing. Yeah, but if you don't do something, okay, well, who are you going to support? The Nazis or the expansionists who can start World War III? Whatever you think, man. Whatever you think. I'll go along with it. Okay, just do this. Okay, whatever. Listen. So these are 2 things here that can lead very much to conformity. It isn't just having to scare people. Do what you're told. It's first chance you get, those people are going to rebel if they hate you. If they hate you. But if you can make them apathetic, that means they can't hate you. They can't hate you. They don't care enough. That's part of being apathetic. And then people aren't sure what to believe. You got fake news, you got deep fakes, you have all this stuff going on. I don't even know what the definition of words are anymore. And so that's the thing that leads to this ultimately. It isn't just that we're not courageous. It's not just that we're cowards. Sorry, it's not just that we're cowards. It's that we conform because of these things here. And once you have these things here, you don't know what to believe, you aren't angry enough or fired up enough to do anything, well then there's no revolution. And then, but now you start to ask yourself, but I feel like people are trying to piss me off. What are they trying to get out of me? I guarantee you it's going to be one of these things here. They want to make things unsteady. They want people to, if we were together on everything, this stuff couldn't be happening. So what do you have to do? You got to make people fight. You have to make people disagree about things. Unless you can get people fighting between themselves, and the more we're fighting between ourselves, the more that we're not looking at who the real enemy is. I think it was in this class, right, last week. I asked you guys to look over there. No? You guys ever, the building, you notice the gray building? No, over here by the door. No, actually I moved over there by my desk. You ever feel like that's what's happening on the news these days?
Yeah.
Look over there. What? Oh my God. No, over here, man. That's still last week. What, this thing over here? Dude, you're too late. It's over there now. Great. And you've completely forgotten about the building over there now. I mean, well, 2 weeks ago we were scared because there were truckers honking in Ottawa. That went away, didn't it? We completely neglected the fact that the Canadian government invoked the Emergency War Powers Act for the first time in its history. They didn't even do it after 9/11. They did it because some truck drivers were honking horns for a few weeks. And then people were like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Putin did what? And then we're over there. Of course, we have forgotten completely about COVID, which is over there, right? You saw the thing about the mask test on September 12th? I'm sorry, September 12th, March 12th. The mask mandate goes away on March 12th. The governor has said no more masks, and we're sitting going, oh, thank you, sir, allowing us to uncover all faces. And I'll be curious to see how many people still wear them, because our school here has said, well, we're not sure what we're going to do. Why? Because they're going to wait to see what other people do. Because if other people do it and say, okay, take them off, then they'll be like, oh, okay. And then if there's an outbreak, well, we just followed the normal, we just followed the guidelines. We just followed what we were told to do. So I'll also be curious to see how many people continue to wear them, even after that. I bet it's going to be many. Because masks are the thing that are going to save your life, right? But now we also know that masks don't work. And now we know, no, they do work, but they work in a clinical setting. Well, no, only certain masks. Well, you know what? Screw it. Better safe than sorry, right? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?